Welcome, team. Today we're going to be looking at a CMP RPT report or NCOMP report or service schedule. And all of them are going to have a trend. So they're going to show you what is today and what it was in the date that you choose from data that you have run from before. These are the files that you're going to be needing. The equipsit, the RPT, and C usage. And the key, of course. The other ones you're not going to use, but it's fine if they're there, even though you're not going to use them. They're not going to hinder anything. So let's open up the query. This is the query. And right here, this is the address of where the files are located. It's very important that you have the address of where the files are located, or you're not going to be able to do anything. So the file, you copy it, Control C. And then you come over here and you paste it. So that's the address of the file where the files are located. From the one I had before, I had this differently. I had this plan date maintenance call, but it's supposed to be plan date, not the plan date maintenance call. And these are the fields that need to be in the equipsit, in the ZMP RPT, the equipsit, and C usage. You can have more, but don't have less. These are the ones that I use to calculate the queries. First, let's look at the NCOMP report. The NCOMP report shows you equipment that's enrolled because it's either labeled NCOMP or it has a biannual, bi-monthly 60-day PMCS. It shows how many you have on hand, how many are missing a service in the last 365 days. We're gonna go over in more detail later on. How many you are enrolled? How many have usage, meaning that they've been driving more than 10 miles in the last 60 days, and the percentage of all of that. So this tab right here shows how many miles the vehicle needs to have to get credit. You can make it 10. As the regulation says, as the memo says, or you could change it to whatever you want to change it to, just in case in the future the number changes. This is the date that the CMP RPT was pulled from G Army. Not necessarily the date that it was pulled, the date that it was saved, the date that it was modified. The trend date is the date that's available, the date that you are going to be comparing the trend to. And available trends are the dates that you have trend history of. So if you change this trend date, I'm going to add a drop down to it. If you change this trend to one of these trend dates, you take the 25th. Here's a drop down. Take the 25th. And then if you're only doing trend, come right over here, right click and refresh. And that'll only change the trend. It'll be quicker than if you refresh the whole set. It'll take a few seconds for it to refresh, but it'll compare the trend to the trend that you chose. So if you want to check another date, this is the 27th, and refresh. So it'll compare the data from the 30th to data from the 27th. And here this is a pivot table. And because it's a pivot table, you could do anything that you could do with a pivot table. So I recommend that you research how to work with pivot tables so you can make them work for you the way you want to work. They show the fields for the pivot table. So in here, these are the fields that you want to choose. If you want to have a brigade, you don't put it in there. If you're only a company, just only leave the company. If you want to look at the battalions, you leave the battalions. And so on and so forth. You just take it like this. So you only see the battalions, the company. And here you see the battalions. It's a pivot table. You need to learn how to make that better for yourself. And here you choose FMTV or Humvees. Click here, you select both. We will go over the trends once we go over to the trend tab over here. So now let's go to the service report. The service report tells you what's missing because it does not have a service. It is not scheduled to receive a service in the next 365 days or 730 days, depending on NCOMP. It shows what's overdue based on what's reported in CMP RPT, and late is equipment that the service is past its planned date. It's not overdue; it's just late. It's going to be overdue soon. And the next 30, 3160, and 6190 days. This right over here is the number of days that you want the report to go out to. If you make it 180, it'll go 188 days out. If you change it over here, right click against the pivot table, so you could choose which fields you want to look at, and then you refresh it, and it'll search 188. It'll bring 180 days worth of services. The bigger the number, the slower the query, because it's going to be bringing a lot of information. So if you have a large pool, such as a large brigade or a division, make sure that you keep this to the minimum that you're going to use it. If you're not going to be looking at 180 days, don't bring 180 days. Or if it's just 90, just leave it up to 90. The bigger this is, the slower the query, and the bigger the file is going to be, because it's going to save the trends for 180 days, which is more files to be saved. This is the date, again, of when the report was pulled from G Army. Again, the trend. This is the date that you're going to be comparing the trend to, and these are the trends available. So if you choose a trend for the 28th of March, and then let's leave this at 90. Now 90, and right click on refresh. There you go. So now it has a trend for the 28th, so it'll change. And it'll be in a pivot table. You could choose how you see things. If you want to see which numbers you want to see, which numbers you want to see, or the whole thing. Okay, now let's discuss missing services. This number right here is how many days out you want to give credit to for it being a service. Equipment is NCOMP. FMTVs are 730 days, and Humvees are 365 days. They need Humvees need annual service, and FMTVs need a biannual service. So those numbers are selected from the key. In the key, this is a column that says how many days of service, how many days the interval are for that piece of equipment. So once the equipment keeps getting added, we are going to say how many days they need a service by, according to whatever guidance is given. And 365 is for the rest of the equipment that's not, as of now, enrolled in NCOMP, that it needs an annual biannual service. These right here are the other priorities. The ones that are red are not receiving credit for. Because if you only have a quarterly service within a year or 2 years, then that piece of equipment is missing its annual service, or maybe it's semi-annual service. So it's only counting the annual, biannual, so on and so forth. And if you want to include it, if you want to include the quarterly, right now we have 1,172. If you add the query, that's the one we have. If you add the quarterly, yes, and you run it, the number is going to be higher than that, because it's going to count all the quarterlies that are only receiving a quarterly service. Now that we included the quarterlies, there are 307 missing services. That means that there are 865 pieces of equipment that only have a quarterly service. They don't have an annual, or they don't have a biannual, just a quarterly service. So this sheet is also good because here you're going to have a list of all the equipment that's missing service. All you have to do is copy the list, go to IP24, run it, and that way you can validate if it's actually missing. If it's valid, if it's missing, the next step you could do is you could go to the Equipsit and print 5098s. In my unit, we have a PFC. Every morning he runs the reports, and he takes this, and he takes every battalion and selects a battalion and sends that battalion all its 5098s. So he sends an email every morning with all the battalion's 5098s of what's missing services. If you send out a 5098, there's no discussion, there's no argument. It's a 5098. It is not a spreadsheet that says that you have missing services. It's a 5098 that shows that the equipment does not have a service. So that's what this sheet is. It's equipment that is missing a service in the next 365 days, or whatever the NCOMP requirement is, like 734 FMTV. And these are the services, the priorities that are included. This is a list of equipment that's not enrolled in NCOMP. At the same token, you could take the equipment and you could validate with IP24 to see if the equipment is actually enrolled in NCOMP. And if it's just changing the name, then with T code MCH01, you could easily change all these one keystroke. So if all you need is to change the name, just MCH01. These are the trends. These are the services trends. The number over here is the age of the queries that you want to keep from history, from the past. So 10 means that if the report is more than 10 days old, it's not going to be kept. So right now, this one's only going to keep reports that are 10 days and newer. If you have a small battalion or a small brigade, you could have it as big as you can, as big as you want. The bigger it is, the more space the file is going to take. And also, if it's too big, all you could do is you could right-click right here, move a copy, and you could create a copy in a new workbook. If you do this, this will be a standalone document that you could use, and later on come and you could use this pivot table, and you can look at the history of the dates that you have available. There's no trends here, but it gives you the numbers of what it was on these dates. And the more you do, the bigger the trends are going to be. This is very useful for reports, for NCOERs, for awards, for OERs, for anything that you need numbers for. And these are accurate numbers. The same thing with the NCOMP trend. How old, how many you want to keep. The bigger the number, the more you're going to keep. If you run one every single day for the next 10 days, you will keep 10. If you run one every 5 days, then you're going to have 2, because it's not how many you have, it's how many days old they are. And again, the same thing. If you have like 15, 20 different dates, and you want to save it, just right-click, move on copy, create a copy, and new workbook, and hit OK. And once you hit OK, you just name it, date it, and save it, and then you're going to have a standalone document, again, where you could look at what the trends were in the past. The best way that we could help our companies, our battalions, our brigade, is by providing them with good, clear, consistent information. If today we tell them that they have 10 missing services, and they go and they check, and there's no missing services, and this becomes a pattern, we tell them something, and they come back and say it's not true, and that it's not true, then we lose credibility. We need to make sure that we provide good, consistent, accurate information. Using GCSS Army combined with Excel we could see so much. We could find what is wrong. We could find where training needs to happen. A lot of the missing services are because the tolerance is wrong. You could see that it has an annual in 365 days, and then it has a biannual in 365 days. That is accurate, because that means every 365 days, our services are going to come in. The mistake happens when they have, in a combined service plan, they have a multi-counter service plan. They have 365 days for an annual, and then they have 730 days for a biannual. So once the annual is done, it's going to take 2 years for the biannual to come. So using this, we could identify the maintenance plans that are wrong. Whose duty is it? Whose responsibility is it to find out if a piece of equipment has a missing service? Well, it's the operator. The operator every Monday, once a week, they get a 398, and this 398, it shows if the equipment has a service or not. If they notice it has a if they notice it's missing a service and they bring it up, the maintenance platoon, the mechanics could fix it. If they bring it up and don't fix it, then there's a problem. If they don't find it, then there's a problem. We know what the problem is. And knowing this, we could go and recommend some training, recommend some mentoring, go down to the companies and find a young lieutenant and explain to him or her why this happened. Yes, we could find out. We could take a spreadsheet. You see how quickly this does it. But this is not for us to fix it. This is for us to identify what the problem is. And once we identify the problem, we generate training to fix the problem. We cannot fix problems. If we fix it, we are cheating our soldiers. We have to identify the mistakes so that we could help them help themselves. They know how to do this. There's nothing that I know, that we know, that they don't know. Thank you. Thank you very much.